Alina had dreamed of this day for years, the culmination of sleepless nights, endless research, and countless sacrifices. And now, as she adjusted the robe over her shoulders and walked toward the stage, her heart raced with pride and excitement, ready to see her family cheering in the audience, ready to feel the joy she had imagined so many times while studying late into the night. The auditorium was filled with applause and chatter, the air buzzing with anticipation. But her eyes immediately scanned the crowd for the people she loved most, hoping to catch the proud smile of her mother, the encouraging nod from her father, and the familiar, excited wave from her brother. That's when she froze, the joy she had carried all morning twisting into confusion and disbelief. Because her mother was not in the front row, not smiling, not waving, not celebrating her achievement. And in that moment, the excitement drained from her body like cold water, leaving a hollow ache in her chest that made it difficult to breathe. Instead of being in the crowd, she noticed her mother across the street through the large auditorium windows, laughing with her brother's friends, holding a plate at a small barbecue he had organized, completely oblivious to the ceremony that was taking place inside the hall, a day that had been meant to honor Alina's years of dedication and effort. Her stomach twisted, her hands trembled, and the world seemed to tilt sideways as she tried to process what she was seeing. The disbelief giving way to a sharp, almost physical sting of betrayal, because this wasn't just about missing a ceremony. It was about being overlooked, dismissed, treated as if her accomplishment didn't matter compared to a casual family gathering organized by her brother. She blinked rapidly, unwilling to believe it, hoping that maybe she had misread the scene, that someone else had been sitting with her mother, that she would turn around and find her family cheering like she had imagined. But each passing second confirmed the truth, and the humiliation settled over her like a heavy cloak, burning her cheeks and making her want to disappear from the room entirely. She remembered the countless times she had stayed up late working, sacrificing weekends, turning down social events to focus on research. All the moments her mother had praised small achievements in her brother's life while barely acknowledging her own milestones, and the pattern, once subtle, now felt like a sharp, undeniable truth, and it ignited a simmering anger beneath the initial shock. Alina felt the urge to storm out, to confront her mother in front of everyone, to demand answers, to let the pain and frustration spill over. But she paused, taking a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest tighten and then ease slightly, realizing that acting impulsively would not give her satisfaction or justice. It would only satisfy her immediate anger while leaving the deeper wound unresolved. Instead, she focused on controlling her reaction, on keeping her composure, letting the ceremony proceed. Because she understood that the moment could be used strategically, not destructively. That the humiliation she felt could be transformed into resolve and clarity rather than chaos. Her eyes scanned the auditorium, catching glimpses of professors, classmates, and friends, all celebrating milestones and achievements. And she realized that her life and work mattered far beyond the approval of her mother or the favoring of her brother. That the applause of strangers could be more validating than the neglect of someone who was supposed to love her unconditionally. The bitterness rose, sharp and immediate, but she let it simmer quietly, planting the seed of something stronger than anger: determination. That determination was a quiet, burning thought in her mind, a vow she whispered silently to herself as she accepted her diploma, smiled at the camera, and shook hands with the dean. She would not allow her mother's absence or favoritism to define her. She would not let the disregard diminish her years of effort, and she would make sure that her accomplishments, her dedication, and her worth would be recognized on her own terms, in ways no one could ignore. By the time the ceremony ended and she walked off the stage, her resolve had hardened, the mix of disappointment, hurt, and rage transforming into a focused determination that promised action, that promised she would not remain invisible in her own family, that she would reclaim attention, respect, and dignity through her choices. And she would do it with strategy, not outburst. Because she understood now that the truest form of revenge and empowerment came from rising above betrayal, while remaining in control, turning the shock and pain into the first step toward a powerful, undeniable response. The days after her doctorate ceremony were a whirlwind of emotions for Alina, each one sharper than the last. The disappointment and shock of seeing her mother prioritize her brother over her still gnawing at her like an open wound. But instead of letting herself collapse under the weight of neglect, she channeled her energy into observation and strategy, quietly documenting every detail of her mother's favoritism. From casual remarks to overlooked milestones, piecing together a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight for years. She began noticing small things she had previously ignored. The way her accomplishments were minimized at family dinners. The way her brother's successes were amplified even when they were minor. And the subtle ways her mother's attention shifted effortlessly toward him while she, Alina, remained in the background. Expected to perform and succeed silently, with no recognition beyond polite acknowledgement. She tracked dates, events, and social gatherings, noting how she had been consistently sidelined while her brother received praise for trivial achievements. And every new piece of evidence only strengthened her resolve, transforming the initial sting of betrayal into a focused, almost calculated determination to reclaim her dignity. At first, she considered confronting her mother directly, imagining the words she could say, the emotions she could unleash. But she realized that a direct confrontation without preparation could backfire, leaving her vulnerable and possibly ignored again, and she wanted something more permanent. Something that would not just be a momentary release of anger, but a clear demonstration that her worth could not be overlooked or dismissed. Social media became a quiet ally in her plan. She shared milestones, academic awards, and research achievements in subtle, tasteful ways, highlighting her journey without explicitly criticizing anyone, yet allowing friends, family, and colleagues to see the truth of her hard work and dedication. Letting recognition come naturally rather than forcing it. And she noticed how attention began shifting subtly toward her, the admiration of those outside her family providing a validation her mother had failed to offer. Alina also reached out to mentors, colleagues, and friends who had followed her academic journey, sharing updates and discussing accomplishments. Gaining support and acknowledgement from the community she had built through years of effort, a network of people who valued her contribution and celebrated her success authentically, which gave her confidence that her worth extended far beyond her family's recognition and that any neglect from them would not define her. Yet beneath this calculated approach, she wrestled with waves of emotion, moments of bitterness and sadness rising unexpectedly, sometimes in the middle of a quiet evening, sometimes while reviewing old photographs of family events where she had been overshadowed, and she allowed herself to feel these emotions fully, not as an excuse for rash behavior, but as fuel to sharpen her focus and refine her strategy. Understanding that acknowledgement of pain was necessary to transform it into strength, she made mental lists, planning potential encounters, family gatherings, and ways to assert herself without aggression, imagining scenarios where she could speak confidently, highlight her accomplishments naturally, and allow her success to speak louder than any complaint, picturing how she could command attention, respect, and admiration without creating conflict that would distract from her ultimate goal. Each day, her anger evolved into something steady and precise. It's no longer a raw reaction, but a deliberate tool for empowerment, guiding decisions about when to engage, how to respond, and which battles to fight publicly versus privately, all while continuing to excel academically and professionally, reinforcing her worth through action rather than argument. As she pieced together evidence, reflected on her past, and planned for future interactions, a sense of calm determination settled over her. And she began to see the situation clearly. Her mother's neglect had given her motivation, her brothers. Favoritism had shown her the need for boundaries, and her own capabilities had provided the path to reclaim agency over her life, dignity, and recognition. By the end of the week, Alina had transformed her hurt into strategy, her disappointment into focus, and her desire for revenge into a carefully planned path toward asserting herself. Not through anger or humiliation, but through visible, undeniable achievement, confident that when the right moment arrived, she would act with control, intelligence, and clarity, ensuring that her accomplishments and worth would be impossible to ignore and that any lesson her mother needed to learn would be taught without compromising her own integrity or peace of mind. The next family gathering arrived faster than Alina expected, and she approached it with a calm precision that came from days of careful planning, rehearsing how she would present herself, what she would say, and how she would let her accomplishments speak louder than any words of complaint or accusation. Knowing that her mother's favoritism had created an opening for her to assert herself without conflict, the backyard was alive with chatter, music, and the smell of barbecue drifting in the air, and as soon as she stepped in, several eyes turned, including her mother's, whose smile faltered just enough for Alina to notice a subtle crack in the confidence she usually projected when lavishing attention on her son. Alina greeted relatives with warmth and ease, engaging in conversation while carefully weaving in details of her recent achievements. Her doctorate, publications, awards, and the impact of her work all shared naturally as if part of everyday conversation rather than a pointed display, letting her success become undeniable without creating drama. Her mother tried to interject occasionally, tempting to redirect attention or minimize her accomplishments. But Alina remained composed, speaking with quiet confidence and letting the narrative of her dedication and success unfold effortlessly. And she could feel the subtle shift in the crowd. The eyes that had once lingered on her brother now turning to her, the admiration unmistakable and contagious. She noticed small reactions, relatives whispering, friends raising eyebrows in surprise, colleagues nodding approval, and the satisfaction in seeing recognition flow naturally filled her with a quiet power. The kind that comes from asserting oneself with dignity rather than anger, knowing that the moment was both a demonstration of worth and a reclaiming of respect. Her brother's casual boasting and the familiar laughter that had always dominated the room now seemed muted, overshadowed by the presence of a daughter whose achievements could no longer be ignored. And even her mother, though trying to maintain composure, could not hide the flicker of realization that Alina's accomplishments demanded acknowledgement, and that favoring one child over another did not erase years of dedication and hard work. As the gathering continued, Alina approached her mother directly, offering a polite smile and mentioning the graduation ceremony, highlighting moments of pride with a measured tone that conveyed both confidence and composure, and her mother struggled to respond appropriately, caught between habitual favoritism and the undeniable truth of Alina's success. A tension that Alina allowed to linger without hostility, letting the subtle lesson take root without force or insult. Every interaction, every casual mention of her work was deliberate yet natural, designed to assert presence, demand respect, and reclaim attention without creating overt conflict. And she observed the reactions carefully, noting who acknowledged her accomplishments, who seemed surprised, and who had taken her efforts for granted. Cataloging the responses in her mind as proof that strategy and patience were far more effective than rash confrontation. The crowd's admiration grew, and Alina felt a rising sense of satisfaction, a calm, deep fulfillment that came not from vengeance, but from seeing her worth recognized in a way that was visible, respected, and undeniable, the kind of validation that could not be ignored or dismissed by favoritism or neglect. Even her brother, previously the center of attention, began to sense the shift, his jokes falling flat as relatives turned to Alina with genuine interest. And she maintained a poised smile, never gloating, letting the shift speak for itself. knowing that the quiet power of her presence was far more effective than any dramatic display of anger. By the time the evening drew to a close, Alina had not only reclaimed her space within the family dynamic, but had done so with elegance and control, proving that her achievements and dedication could not be diminished by favoritism, and that recognition could be earned, demanded, and noticed without hostility, humiliation, or spite. She left the gathering with a sense of accomplishment that went beyond her academic achievements, a satisfaction rooted in strategy, composure, and self-respect, understanding that this moment, the carefully orchestrated balance of presence and accomplishment, was the true climax of her response. The point where preparation, patience, and dignity converged to create a statement far more powerful than confrontation or dramatics could have achieved. The fire that had once burned from hurt and neglect had transformed into a steady, deliberate force, guiding her actions and ensuring that the lesson was clear. Neglect could not erase value. Favoritism could not overshadow achievement and self-respect. And careful planning were the most effective tools in reclaiming both attention and dignity, leaving her with quiet triumph and control over the narrative she had long been denied. After the family gathering, Alina felt a sense of calm she hadn't expected. A quiet satisfaction that came not from anger or revenge, but from the knowledge that she had reclaimed her place with dignity and control, proving that her achievements could not be ignored, and that she did not need to humiliate anyone to assert her worth. The days that followed were filled with reflection and careful decisions. She allowed herself to acknowledge the lingering pain from years of favoritism. But she also recognized how far she had come, how much she had accomplished despite the neglect, and how the strategy she had employed had given her the recognition she deserved without sacrificing her composure or integrity. She continued to focus on her work, sharing accomplishments in her academic and professional circles, building a network of respect and admiration that existed independently of family dynamics. And each acknowledgement reinforced her confidence, reminding her that her value was not dependent on anyone's approval, not even her mother's. Social media updates, professional achievements, and quiet but deliberate conversations allowed her to claim credit where it was due. And she noticed the subtle shifts in how her family referred to her accomplishments afterward. Small acknowledgments, nods, and comments that previously would have gone unnoticed, showing that strategy and composure could reshape perceptions more effectively than confrontation. She also spent time nurturing her own happiness outside of family approval, reconnecting with friends, pursuing hobbies, and allowing herself to enjoy experiences she had postponed or sacrificed in pursuit of her doctorate. Realizing that reclaiming personal joy was a form of empowerment, just as important as gaining recognition for her achievements. Occasionally, thoughts of her mother's absence at the ceremony surfaced, a flicker of hurt or disappointment, but each time she reminded herself that the past could not be changed, only navigated with wisdom, and she focused on creating moments of pride and fulfillment that were entirely under her control, building a life where her happiness and success were independent of anyone else's choices or neglect. Her mother eventually reached out, hesitant and careful, offering congratulations and attempting to reconnect, and Alina responded on her own terms, polite and measured, asserting boundaries while allowing reconciliation only in ways that respected her dignity and agency. Knowing that control over her reactions was as much a victory as any recognition of her accomplishments. Over time, the subtle shifts in family dynamics became more apparent. Relatives began consulting her on decisions, showing interest in her work, and giving attention in ways that had been denied for years. A quiet acknowledgement of the power and influence she had gained not through confrontation, but through steady persistence, visibility, and strategic assertion of her worth. Alina reflected on the journey, recognizing that the desire for revenge had initially been a firestorm of hurt and anger. But by transforming it into deliberate action and personal empowerment, she had achieved a result far more satisfying than one humiliation or retribution could ever provide. gaining not only recognition but also control over her own narrative, her future, and her emotional well-being. She embraced the lesson fully. Revenge, when motivated by pure anger, can be fleeting and hollow, but when guided by clarity, composure, and strategic action, it can lead to growth, recognition, and a profound sense of self-worth, teaching those who overlooked her that her presence and achievements could not be ignored, while allowing her to maintain integrity and grace. In the quiet evenings, as she reviewed her achievements, planned future projects, and celebrated personal milestones, Alina understood that the true victory had been internal. The reclamation of her confidence, the establishment of respect on her own terms, and the creation of a life that was independent, fulfilling, and undeniably hers, built on her efforts, resilience, and wisdom rather than anyone else's approval. She felt a deep sense of freedom, knowing she could navigate future challenges with the same composure and clarity, that she had learned how to turn betrayal and neglect into motivation and opportunity, and that the lessons of patience, strategy, and self-respect would guide her for the rest of her life. In the end, the pain of being overlooked at her doctorate ceremony had become a catalyst for growth, a turning point that revealed her strength, sharpened her focus, and allowed her to assert herself without losing dignity, teaching her that the most satisfying form of revenge is not in causing harm, but in rising above betrayal, reclaiming agency, and creating a life where respect, recognition, and happiness are earned, unshakable, and entirely your own. As Alina looked forward to the future, she did so with a quiet confidence, a calm sense of triumph, and a heart free from resentment, knowing that she had navigated the storm with wisdom, strategy, and grace, and in that achievement she had found the ultimate reward, proving to herself more than anyone else that she was capable, strong, and unstoppable.